I think I just got the cue to start. I hope you can hear me. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Sampson. I lead the team at United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. And I want to thank you for joining us for today's Lead United Community Conversation. This is the inaugural convening of what we plan to be a new series, and we are honored by your presence digitally and by the distinguished panel members that you'll hear from in the next hour. From the City of Dallas, we have Dallas City Council member Adam Magoo, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem and District 10 City Council representative, also the chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on Human and Social Recovery and Assistance. From the Texas Instruments Foundation, we have Terry West, who is the board chair of the TI Foundation. From the Meadows Foundation, we have Charles Glover joining us today. And representing the nonprofit sector, we have Pastor Chris Simmons, who leads the team and congregation at Cornerstone. Today's Dallas Morning News featured an op-ed from United Way of Metropolitan Dallas with the tagline, "We are all in this together. Now let's get out of this together." And we are joined today by a group of partners that will definitely help lead the way. The coronavirus has severely disrupted our lives in ways that will have long-term effects on our North Texas community. Teachers and students have been forced out of their classrooms, unemployment is soaring to record levels, and our community's health is at risk as we battle this virus together. But together, we can change this. These issues, education, income, and health, are the day in and day out work of United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. And this crisis brings their importance into sharp focus. Our work is more important now than ever before to build a better future for North Texas. So in collaboration with community leaders, including our panelists today and over 180 partner organizations, United Way is working quickly and strategically to identify gaps in critical community services, invest in nonprofits on the front lines, and also plan for the long-term recovery ahead. In just 7 weeks, we've taken immediate action to address the pressing needs of North Texans adversely affected by coronavirus. We've done this by conducting a comprehensive community assessment to identify the most critical needs, by raising financial resources to address short and long-term challenges. We've impacted the lives already of over 750,000 North Texans, and we've invested over $2.6 million in 188 North Texas nonprofits, including many small grassroots organizations who are providing services and support to isolated and marginalized populations. We're also convening and coordinating with civic, corporate, and philanthropic partners to leverage additional resources that we know will be necessary. Together, we can put our community back on track. We know we can. We are rebuilding lives now and into the future alongside our corporate, civic, philanthropic, and nonprofit partners. United Way is leading the way to lasting change. And we're very fortunate at United Way to work with a lot of social service and community impact experts. Our very own Susan Hoff is at the top of that list, and she and her team collaboratively have led a superior effort in putting our community on a war footing to respond in real time to this crisis. I'm going to hand off to Susan now to facilitate this conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks again to our panelists and to all of our listeners out there. I know we have so many friends that are on the line, as well as I hope many new people as well. It's exciting to get to be the one that asks the questions, because I feel like oftentimes, particularly when I'm in the company of Council Member Magoo, I'm the one that's getting asked questions. So we're going to turn the tables a little bit today. But believe me, we have some of the most amazing folks on the line today. So I'm excited to hear from each of you. So just to start the discussion, we'll ask each of you to share a brief overview of the current situation from your perspective, and what are your biggest challenges, as well as some of your greatest accomplishments. And let's kick that off with Councilmember Magoo.
Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, Jennifer. Amazing group of people. Just being on this panel together, I'm thankful in so many different ways. I am currently, there's a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of optimism. And We have been through a heck of a transition as it relates to the city over the last several weeks. Many of the things that we have accomplished sort of in a triage, expedient manner has seemed like, oh yes, we just have to do this, we have to get it done, and been really encouraged by it. But when you look back ever so often and think of standing up an entire homeless shelter at the K. Bailey Hutchinson Center, and standing up an entire backup hospital also at the K. Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center. And we've transitioned, and through our partner, certainly with all the different folks in the education space, to online education in so many different ways, and what all that meant for so many of us trying to work through some of those issues. We've dealt with putting together, my colleagues on the economic development side have put together options for funding for rental assistance, mortgage assistance. We've pulled together different resources for small business assistance programs that are actually kicking off today for a lot of people, businesses and small business owners in Dallas. It's been an amazing transition, and that's sort of the forward-looking thing that a lot of people see. What a lot of people don't see is how even internally in the city, through hiring freezes, and even through our entire code department, just about over 170 code officers have transitioned from their normal daily routines to now dealing with enforcement and monitoring of the new orders that were in place, and the different orders that come down from the governor and from the county, and how to make sure we're keeping people safe during the process of all the things related to COVID. It's really been a interesting time from my perspective as well. My colleagues have stepped up in such an amazing way. Other council members that all have areas of specialty, whether it be Jaime Resendez in the education space, or Jennifer Gates in health and our hospital systems. We've had Kara Mendelson, who works extensively in the homeless space, and so many others on my committee and on the other committee that have just come around. And in a very short time, and just over a month, our committee's already met over 7 times and have pulled together partners at the full spectrum of what the city has to offer. And so it's been very encouraging. Now, Wednesday, we get a briefing where we will get the update on our budget stance. And that's, as many of the 188 nonprofits that you've talked about and all the other ones that are out there that United Way and so many others are helping, this is where it really comes down to for the budget for the city. And so we've seen over $30 million reduction right now. I've been through the briefing materials. We'll get all the update, but this will continue to get a bigger hole in our budget as it relates to sales tax, and then future impacts on property taxes and that kind of thing. And we were already struggling with issues from the tornadoes that took place before. And so it is an uncertain time, but goodness, you can't help but see all the progress we've made and all the way people are coming together and not be optimistic about the future of small businesses, of our vulnerable populations, and just our city as a whole. It's really an amazing thing to be a part of, and I consider it a huge honor. And a lot of it is due to the people that are on this call, and certainly those that are on this panel as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Magoo. You know, to move something as big a ship as a city as quickly as has happened is remarkable to see. So I'm going to shift to Pastor Chris Simmons, who really is on the forefront working with nonprofit organizations that are really grassroots in nature, and really meeting the needs of people directly, and kind of get your input.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite to be on this call. And as you mentioned, we are a grassroots organization, a very small nonprofit serving in the South Dallas Fair Park community. And as you know, our neighborhoods are becoming more of an epicenter of where the virus is drastically spreading among residents in our neighborhood. And what we've discovered is that when people are in crisis, that they tend to go to familiar faces. And those oftentimes are the smaller nonprofits or even neighborhood churches or organizations that they're familiar with that are trying to respond with very limited resources to meet the basic needs of community residents. And so I would like to say thank you so much to the United Way for really investing in those nonprofits, particularly in the southern sector that is really being stretched and challenged during this time, trying to figure out how to meet some of the basic needs of community residents, things like food, clothing, and shelter so that individuals who are oftentimes now fearful about their very day-to-day existence can have those needs met. So some of the things that we're engaged in is we provide a kitchen that we were providing before, a soup kitchen for homeless individuals, and have seen about 125% increase. We provided a shower and clothing closet, and we shut it down initially when the shelter in place order came down, but realized that at the request of many of the homeless that we serve, that they had not had a shower or something as basic as a change of clothes in almost 7 weeks. And so we were able to hire through the grant furloughed workers to run that particular operation for needs in the community. We had a number of kids who were coming down to our kitchen to eat with the homeless, and we didn't feel that that was a good, safe environment. And so we created another avenue where we could feed children off-site, away from our homeless population, so that they wouldn't be so closely associated with and potentially come down with the virus. And so we have realized that there are just a number of needs in the community. People are nervous, people are scared. We have seen an increase, as we've heard, in spousal abuse as a result of this. A lot of families are just really having a very, very difficult time. And a lot of the on the ground small nonprofits in the community are seeing the fallout day to day as a result of this virus.
Thank you, Pastor Simmons. You said, again, in a crisis, and oftentimes not even in a crisis, but certainly when we're squished, our inclination is to go to those trusted resources, which you definitely represent. But there are also oftentimes resources that have tiny, tiny margins as it is. And so as we move into times when you have things like 125% increase overnight in demand for your services, the challenges are critical. So I'm going to turn it to Charles Glover, who is a funding colleague with the Meadows Foundation, to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for bringing this together, and for all my friends on the line who know me, it is me behind this mustache. It's kept me safe and healthy throughout the past few weeks. But you know, the reality is, when you look at the situation, I think, and thinking about that perspective, it's just such an unprecedented situation that the deepest challenges of it being from so many different angles. One, how dynamic the situation is. And two, how fast that dynamicism continues to play out, yet has deeply, deeply, deeply entrenched effects on not just the nonprofit space, the folks that are trying to be served, our community systems, our government systems, philanthropy. These are very real things that are happening in a short period of time in a dynamic nature, and will have long-term effects, not just today, obviously, in the midterm, but the long term. And so when you put on that lens, that I think that also is where some of the opportunity opens up, and where we've seen a lot of engagement, and particularly in engaging with some of these bright spots. So having the chance to work together with a lot of our philanthropic partners, United Way obviously being an entity that we were able to invest in very early, and seeing those dollars get out of the door as quick as possible for some of these relief efforts, while also keeping the mind's eye focus. And at Meadows, obviously, with our strategic areas in education, environment, and mental health, so the growing work in the homeless sector, that's highlighting the deep importance of these infrastructures to be well capitalized and strong in good times. Because when we see these things, these events, such as the emergencies that we are seeing right now, in this just deep, unprecedented event, the ability to respond to that and the long-term impact of that will be as strong as our infrastructures of the many of the folks who are on this call today, both listening and sharing. And so thinking about how do we engage in that from an emergency standpoint, and then how do we build that infrastructure and maintain the support where we know good things were happening before, where more things will have to happen now. When I see some bright spots like that with, for instance, the COVID task force and the conversations that have been driven around early childhood and opening up opportunities for systems that create access points in emergency situation, but can be used well beyond the situation surrounding COVID, or food supply chain issues, where we're seeing immediate resolutions for fresh food that is going bad, and sheltered systems that will need to be in place in order for that to not happen in the future. That's solving issues not only now, but issues that existed well before now. And the last one that I would highlight there is also when we look at things like internet connectivity and the broadband conversation that's now being hyper driven for a need that was there, beforehand. But the situation is very real. And looking at those macro pictures has to be balanced with a very, very real situation that our most marginalized populations were already in situations of both inequity and a lack of resources, and that is now compounded. And it has been incumbent upon us to step up. And because individually, none of us can do all that would it require, it's that collaborative spirit, Susan, that I've seen not just amidst folks who are on this call, but across the state of Texas who have really raised up. And I'm very fortunate to be at an institution that has seen and worked with a number of emergencies and crises over the last 65 years, obviously none such as this, but engaging in that work with all of those perspectives has become the daily task.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, it is, all these issues that you brought up have been bubbling along under the surface for a long time, and maybe not even too far under the surface. This type of disruption has brought them to the forefront. And I think the ball now is in our court, because how are we going to move forward? So thank you. So I'll turn now, speaking of trusted people that we turn to and trust in times of crisis and good times and in challenging times, to one of our most trusted advisors, Terry West from the Testis Instruments Foundation. Welcome, Terry. Terry, I think you're mute. There you go.
All right, I failed on my first job.
It's okay.
Thank you, Susan. And let me add my thanks to all the others on this call. What's being done by the city, what's being done by the nonprofits, what's being done by United Way, and what's being done by other funders and foundations is just terrific. And while this is a crisis of unprecedented proportion, certainly in our lifetimes, I really can't think of anywhere I'd rather be while we're going through it, because Dallas in the North Texas community is one that truly does care. Certainly from TI's perspective, from the company perspective, the company was facing the same challenges that so many others were. First and foremost, how do you keep employees safe, yet still get customers, especially medical equipment customers, the semiconductors that they needed for really important electronic equipment for diagnostics and testing and treatment. And they had to figure out how to do that on a global basis in more than 30 different countries, not just in Dallas. So from a corporate standpoint, I think that was initially one of the bigger challenges. From the TI Foundation's standpoint, our biggest challenge was really in assessing, how much could we invest in this and where could we put our dollars so that they would do the most good. We were literally just a month away from making our first and our largest grants of the year. So we literally put all of that on hold, recalibrated, and set aside what we'd been planning to do, because we realized that this pandemic is a once in 100 years impact to human health and livelihoods all over the world. So, the great things we had planned to invest in, we realized needed to wait and could wait because this crisis is of uncertain proportions, and we needed to do what we could to rise to the occasion and do what we could to help. So we were able literally to reconfigure our entire year of funding and approve an early round of emergency grants on March 17th, which was, I think, about a week ahead of the Dallas County shelter-in-place order. And then we were able to take a step back, take a deeper look at the need, and then approve a larger round of grants on April 8th, kind of as we saw the magnitude of what we were facing, and that became a bit clearer. I know that at TI during this time, TI has some big-hearted employees, just as all of Dallas does. But employees around the world were really wanting to know how they could actively help with what was going on and contribute. So we have a lot of virtual volunteering going on, a lot of fundraising, even at the grassroots level going on. In India alone, TI employees donated more than $90,000 for relief efforts. And then there were grassroots efforts like that all over other parts of the TI world. In early April, TI at the corporate level provided millions in funding and protective equipment to many of the large international locations. And I think in all, between the combination of what TI employees are doing, what the TI the corporation is doing, and what the TI Foundation is doing, I think we now have more than 10 million being donated around the world today. So while that is a drop in the bucket to the need, we're happy that we could step up and help do our part.
Thank you, Terry. So let's, each of you have talked a bit about partnerships and resources. You all definitely, as we've said, are partnerships and partners and tremendous resources for United Way and our community. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what some of your most important resources and your partnerships have been throughout this crisis, and who you see moving forward. And I'll start with you, Pastor Simmons.
Okay. Yeah.
There
So
you go.
one of the things that we have learned in the midst of this is the importance of collaboration. That there are very limited resources, and really, instead of reinventing the wheel, of becoming a student of what's involved and what's available to our community, and really then sharing that information out to our neighbors, so that they have the resources and can have those needs met in their daily lives. We have learned that that in these kinds of pandemics, there are no big I's and little U's, that all of us have something to contribute, and as best we can to work alongside of the partners who are out there. And so the city has been a great partner of bringing resources to the neighborhood. We could not do what we do in meeting the increase in demand if it was not for volunteers, whether it's corporate or corporate partners working alongside of us to provide meals, to provide assistance in getting those meals out. The nonprofit world has been a great partner with us. And we know we are focused in on serving our homeless community at Cornerstone, but there are a lot of families in need. There are a lot of other resources, and finding out which nonprofits are out there that are doing those things well in the southern sector and working alongside of them. United Way has been a major partner with us in really living up to that name of uniting those organizations across the Dallas area to bring relief to this particular community. And so they have all been great partners in what we do. And again, we have learned through this whole pandemic that partnership, collaborations are so critical and important to what we do in order to make our community a better place.
Thank you, Pastor. Terry, partnerships, thoughts, resources?
Yeah, so many of them. From a human needs perspective, certainly United Way has been our most important resource in helping us understand what the challenges are that local agencies are facing out there today. You guys conducted a survey early on that was very helpful to us, gave us insight into local needs, and you've since updated that survey with new information, and that's been a really great resource for us. And the collaborative between United Way, Communities Foundation of Texas, Dallas Foundation, and I think 30 other funders has been an ongoing source of insight for us. North Texas Food Bank was important in helping us understand very early on how unemployment was leading to skyrocketing needs for food and basic staples. I think up more than 40%, and I think that number is a few weeks old now, but that need is growing. And then at the same time, certainly folks at TI have been in regular touch with governments at the city, county, state levels, as well as globally, to stay up to date on safety, statistics, what's happening, what to expect going forward, as they make plans for the future. And then also at the foundation, we are also regularly dialing in and listening to calls like this from the Council on Foundation, Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship, among others, to really understand how funders and companies around the world are responding and stay in tune with best practices. So I think also kind of a little different than that. We've also talked literally to every single organization where we've made grants in the past couple of years to understand how this is impacting them, because I think there is no organization that this will not affect. And so making sure we're keeping abreast of what's happening to them and what's going on out there and what the needs are.
Thank you, Terry. So partnerships, amazing connections that appear in some ways right now. If you were to step back and not understand the amount of foundational work that's been done for so many years to create these partnerships, we might think, did these just spring up? Obviously, that foundation has been built for a number of years in that infrastructure. And now we're able to call upon those resources. So Charles, what are you seeing in this arena?
I think first and foremost, for us, what we did is we put the ear to the ground with the grantees and understanding, the folks who are on the ground doing the work and have the vision into the populations that are being hardest hit by this is a huge component of that. And we're very fortunate in that the relationships that we built and the ongoing contacts that we have in trying to learn ourselves with our program officers to our grantees is a huge component into any of this. And that's where collaboration started for us. I would say that, that also looking into the state agencies, the city of Dallas, and understanding that, the response to this was going to have to far exceed philanthropy. And where are we connecting that and aligning that to a public response, either the federal, the state, or the local level. And as you can see the councilman on today, I mean, we've had incredible partners in the ability to do that and galvanize some of that. And then I would say just looking at the philanthropic space as well, and it's been mentioned, but was really led by United Way, the Dallas Foundation and Community Foundation of Texas. And I'll give some exact anecdotes here. But the North Texas Cares component and how that came together would not have been able to come together had these entities not worked with one another in different settings and on ongoing issues. But this has really raised it to the next level. And I think that it's identified a collaboration and a spirit of generosity amongst organizations that was really the next step for collaboration in the space. Now, I will also say, is it perfect? No. And one of the things I am proud of too is not letting perfect be the enemy of good and getting out there and creating opportunities and then learning from them. And I think particularly North Texas Cares, it's so unique in that it has become both a functional tool of application, but also a learning tool of where we can do this work better and how we function as a space as well. And it's just, I haven't seen anything else like it across the state of Texas. And to that end, I think that's something that we should all be very proud of. And then I said I would share an anecdote, and I will say, and I want to call out specifically Ashley Brundage at United Way in Metropolitan Dallas. And she and I have been on phone calls late into evenings that she probably never thought that we would be on. And I know that I'm not the only one that the United Way and others are having those conversations with, but they result in real things. And about 5 weeks ago, we were able to host one of the first PPPP seminars for a lot of small nonprofits who were having trouble accessing banks due to some of the existing inequities and lack of banking relationships. And we were able to push those things out through the network that had been built through North Texas Cares. So again, I say a lot of areas where we continue to take learnings away and where we can improve our own work, but a lot of things functionally coming out of this that I believe come into application in a collaborative spirit in a very functional way, both in our space and ultimately for our partners. And I think without that, I think we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Thank you, Charles. So, and I agree, again, relationships don't happen overnight. That muscle was built beforehand. But I have to say, Councilmember Magoo, my thinking is that it's probably one of the entities that would be hardest to build a relationship is the local government. And so to have seen the way the city, the council, and also the staff of city has jumped into this has been quite remarkable. One of the things that really struck me in one of your first ad hoc committee meetings, several of them, is you lifted up small grassroots nonprofit organizations that probably 99% of the population had never heard of, unless you were the person or some of the people depending upon them. That was such a hard right turn from what I would have expected from the city that it took my breath away in a good way. So please talk about what you're thinking about, how can you give us feed about partnerships, relationships?
Yeah, well, I, I love Pastor Simmons, and he said it best at the beginning, just collaboration. And I'm thinking about, as we have this discussion, just the first notice I got that I was going to be chairing this committee, and we found out about it on a Friday, and we called our first committee meeting Sunday night, which we still didn't even know we had the technology necessarily together to get it done. And during the time period we had to work, we were coming up with this needs assessment and all these structures to try to come and figure out how do we really identify the needs that were most appropriate for the city and private and everybody else to deal with. And as we're doing that, we of course think, well, let's also talk to Susan. Let's talk to United Way, and the work that you did at the onset that Terry mentioned too, with the needs assessment and that original work was so helpful for us to take we could take some of the data and some of the information and address our strategies around that information that was coming in so quickly. And so that's what really helped us at the onset, to be able to be strategic, even though we're in this emergency triage phase, to address the needs that be addressed. And then, as has been mentioned, the partners that were already there, when you pick up the phone and make the call and say, hey, this is a need, and they've said, we've already adjusted our modeling, we've already adjusted our programming. In some cases, business partners, we've already adjusted our business model to start producing PPE or hand sanitizer or masks. It was just so encouraging, and the momentum of that, even though we're in a scared time and we don't know the science behind the virus, there's so many unknowns, you start seeing people innovating and going into the space they knew well. Get Shift Done, North Texas, and changing the way we look at how we have food insecurity. It's an issue we know we've had for a long time. Now we have an opportunity to address it in a different way, and not just an opportunity, a requirement to. Dealing with our digital divide and figuring out how to get better wireless and Wi-Fi connections in the community. Dealing with all the other issues. We had partners here locally in District 10 through the Lake Highlands Junior Women's League and the 100 Women of Lake Highlands that just immediately said, oh, all that we were doing, we're changing it. The funding we get, we're going to put to, and we're going to partner with one of our organizations here, Imagine Dallas, and work with Cafe Momentum. And now we're producing food to help for the food insecurity issues, but we're using those individuals that have been laid off or are struggling to have resources, and then work with partners that are already doing great work, but then able to keep doing it in a way. And it's been so encouraging to watch that transition. And, again, it's been said a couple of times, but we couldn't do that if those relationships didn't exist in before all this happened. More recently, at the last committee meeting, I had Dr. Trivedi at UT Southwestern, and as we start looking at some of the issues around mental and behavioral health that is enhancing right now, and how to deal with some of those issues, I'm excited. I'm encouraged by that. There are a lot of people spending time and energy around that. Dr. Trivedi has been working with the city on building a mental and behavioral health clinic in Southern Dallas, partnering with EdCore and UT Southwestern, and so there's so much work going on. More recently, we've got Amy Simmons with the Amazing Grace, who's now working with our Lake Highlands Public Improvement District and raising enough money to feed for 28 days first responders, all 3 shifts at both Presbyterian Hospital, police, and fire stations. Nobody really even knows it's going on. It's just happening with local restaurants, local businesses, and we're just getting the work done. And again, it's the partnerships, and it's the willingness to change what was planned and just go do and meet the need. And now the key is going to be transitioning all this that we're doing to a long-term sustainable approach, because we're reopening right now. So now what's the next step, and how do we keep moving that forward?
Yeah.
But incredibly excited.
Yeah, good point. So I'm going to ask us to go quickly through this question because it's kind of a little bit of a popcorn one, but really want to know, what have you learned in the last 6-7 weeks that you're going to take with you into the future? So I'll just throw out to me, I think many people know my background is in early childhood development. And for years, there is this idea, often probably not accurate, but that all the brain development that you're going to have, 99% of it happens before you're 5 years old. And we camped on that for years. What we've also always known that our brains continue to be malleable and we can learn through our whole life. We just don't think we can learn that much after we're 5. That's the general kind of consensus in the early childhood realm. What I've learned is people can learn all the time. I mean, and the ideas and the concepts and the things that I had, whether it was a grants process has to take 3 to 6 months, or you could never have really meaningful discussions via technology, have changed in a flash. And so what I'm going to take forward is how well we can all continue to learn as we move forward, and the amazing stores of capacity of human brains. So Terry, quick, what have you learned?
You know, I think it's collaboration on the home front, and we've used that word a lot already in this call. But you know, no matter the missteps or the rhetoric or the finger pointing that go on at the national level, it is the local response that counts most for people, because it's here at home where the needs are known, where communities come together to do the best they can to solve problems and make lives better. And I think, you know, a big benefit for us in North Texas is the unprecedented collaboration that we've seen. It's unparalleled. The North Texas Cares Collaborative alone is reviewing hundreds of applications from human services agencies every week. Already, you guys have made millions of dollars available to enable educational tools, food access, mental health services, job search assistance, childcare, to literally thousands of people in need. And it's making a difference, and you're doing it quickly and without duplication so that more funds are getting to more organizations. And I think the volume of help and the speed at which it's coming are really testament to the power of what can get done when we really do all work together.
Charles? There
Yes.
you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Charles has
Sorry,
learned
sorry.
about the mute function.
I've got it. You know, well, oddly enough, so one of the first things I was going to say, Susan, was the communication and clarity are key, right? They're at a premium in a time of turmoil and discord, and the ability to communicate things amongst different partner levels just matters so much. The second thing is lead with empathy and check your ego at the door. You know, the idea that you had for it and what you thought might work may not be the way that it's going to go, and defer and try to find ways of folks that have different perspectives on how to engage with something, and follow that and let the data lead that. And with things changing on a daily basis, I believe it's Mike Tyson said, have a plan. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And so have a plan and have a strategy and have that stake in the ground, and then be prepared to improvise. And the last thing I would just say, it deeply matters who you ride into battle with. And the ability to beat back some of the things that we're facing right now, and just seeing who's on this panel today and the hundreds of folks who are calling in and the work that's happening on a daily basis, these are the folks that we want to ride into battle with. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean everyone's going to agree all of the time, but creating those expectations amongst one another and finding out who can plug in and where they can get the most done, and where a collaboration moves things so much faster, I think is just an absolute key to this. And it's never been demonstrated more in the work that's occurred thus far. And I frankly think will have to occur moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Magoo?
I just really appreciate the question. It's really recognizing, I think those of us on this call and in this space, we all know it, or have known it for years, but how truly connected we are all to one another. This idea that there's a us versus them in any category and space and whatever, this virus has shown that is just absolute a false narrative. But then recognize that, you know, it's till you're standing in line and you have the circle you have to stand in, or the feet prints you have to stand in that's 6 feet away from the one in front of you, and someone else is preparing your food and somebody else is doing delivery, and you're in this place where we are just all connected. And so you start recognizing the need to be able to serve everyone. We talk all the time in in my world about how you love your neighbor the best. And first identify who your neighbor is. And sometimes it's the person right next to you, and sometimes it's the person across the city from you, but figuring out how you serve that individual to keep everybody safe, but then also to address some of these systemic issues that we've had for so long. You just can't neglect it anymore. It's about all of us coming together. I think we say that over and over again, but it's the truth. That is the way that the city of Dallas and our communities and our neighborhoods will come out of this, is recognizing that need and connecting and serving each other really well. And to Charles' point, it becomes, in this space, it becomes about trust and having the relationships and the history with folks that know you can give them the trust that they're going to do the right thing in the right way and get the right information from the community to be most productive. And that doesn't happen overnight, but it sure is wonderful when the responses that have to happen overnight do so in a productive way.
Thank you, Council Member. Pastor Simmons?
Yeah, so I think over the last 8 weeks, I've gotten a PhD in community awareness of learning out at what is really out there and connecting individuals to those resources. I think that the gap between the have and the have-nots is a real gap. And being able to look at the resources that might be available to the community and helping individuals who a lot of times don't have any clue of how to get help find those resources so that they can navigate this particular COVID storm.
Yeah. So, and along that line, Pastor Simmons, you know, as we move forward, we've talked so much about optimism, and there are so many things in this dark COVID cloud that give us real reason to hope and real faith in the human spirit and the connectivity of each of us individually as well as cross sectors. But we also have a history in our community of organizations and people being left out, and you know, whether or not that was intentional or if that's our history. And those that have been most marginalized are those that are most challenged right now. What do you think we are going to have to do to make sure that this recovery is equitable and long-lasting for all of our citizens, not just those who are able to make it through with the support and networks that they already have?
Yeah, I think the key word there will be access, of people having access to livable wages, people having access to health care, people having access to housing, decent and affordable housing are all critical issues and importance to workforce development. Many of those things we have been working on alongside of our friends with the Real Estate Council to try to bring those resources to bear, because we realize that we are in a neighborhood that is definitely challenged. We oftentimes hear a song, "Don't push me because I'm already close to the edge." Right. And I think that this COVID situation has really pushed people who were already close to the edge, who were already marginalized, who already were really struggling with their day-to-day basic needs. And so I think we're going to have to step up of really training people, of finding equitable jobs and opportunities for those in these particular southern sector areas.
Thank you. You know, our city, I think, has no dearth of plans and initiatives and collaboratives that have examined the issues of inequity and tried to figure out what strategically next steps might be, but it feels like now's the time for action. So what do you think, Councilmember Magoo?
Yeah, it is at the forefront of just about every discussion we're having, both recently pre-COVID and during this epidemic as well. Even if you look at the details of how our small business assistance programs were developed, there's specific carve-outs and restrictions based on areas geographically of need, as well as criteria of those that are in the highest area of need. So we're continuing to take into account some of the comments Pastor Simmons said, and we've been talking about today, is how do we try to get that access to the most individuals that can benefit from it and you know, have an impact. And so that's something that we're doing and focusing on a daily basis. We're nowhere close to getting there, and that's, I think, a recognition of even when we think we've made progress, when you see, and let me just say, we're not out of this, right? We're not even close to out of the woods, and the cases are still increasing, and we're going to see a whole nother phase of this that is going to be, punched in the face again, and see how we best navigate this next phase. And I still don't know what that looks like yet, but I know the discussion around equity and how we, the collective we as a city of Dallas, serve well everyone in our city is going to be the biggest question we have to answer. And it's going to get, I think it's going to get harder before it gets better.
Yeah. Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, I hearken back to this, I think it was the front page of the New York Times very early on that said low-income communities and communities of color are being disproportionately impacted, as if it were something that folks weren't expecting. And just given where we have the systems that we have in place and the things that we have been trying to address pre-COVID, which are now being highlighted deeply during COVID, and to Councilman Magoo's point, will continue, and we could have other rounds of this, is how are we leveraging lessons learned right now to be better prepared to serve those communities when this happens, continues to happen, and or when we see this again and beyond. And to that end, it's also it's getting our mindset away from an either or of emergency or recovery or strategy, and make it an and both. It has to be addressed from multiple different perspectives, and that also requires multiple different entities. And again, we keep talking to this collaboration, but policies matter. What we're doing at the regional level matters. What we're doing at the state level matters. How philanthropy from our perspective is engaged, it matters. And those are more than just a relief effort. Those are creating a new. And what we want that new to look like will be incredibly important to how we're able to respond to this on an ongoing basis. And it's what our most marginalized populations deserve. And I think it's something that everyone is committed to. I do not think it's going to be easy. I say again, it's not something that everyone will agree to, but entering into it with a spirit of generosity amongst each other and everyone impacted by this, on top of a realization of what it will actually take, I think is an incredibly important component. And every individual, every sector, every organization, and every person has a deep role in which they can play in that conversation and in that engagement in trying to close some of these gaps. And I think that philanthropy specifically, in trying to address that on an ongoing basis, has a lot of data to look at as it comes out of this. And so when we begin to look at additional strategic investments from an infrastructure standpoint, what data sources are we relying on, both anecdotal and quantitative and longitudinal data, to drive those for those resources to do the most good in the shortest period of time, also setting us up for long-term success.
Thank you, Charles. So again, hearkening back to, this is a crisis of a generation, but I think also an opportunity of generation to not go back to normal, but go back to the way things should be. So I'm going to hand it off to Terry to close us out, and then Terry will hand to you, Jennifer, for some closing words. So thank you all. And Terry?
I don't know that I can add anything any more eloquent than what anyone has already said. The gaps, we've known they're there, but this once in 100-year disaster really has shined a light on them, and we cannot let that light dim or go out once this passes. It will be a long time before this passes. So we have got to keep the intensity level up in understanding those gaps and really tackling them and getting things to a place where we have much more equitable and sustainable place for everyone. I think every single company, nonprofit, government, and human will be impacted by this. And if we all can keep our hearts and our minds and our pocketbooks as open as we can, it will be critical if we really want to come out of this as strong, as we possibly can. It will take all of us working together to do that. So thank you to all of you. That was great input from some great people. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry. And I could not agree more. I learned so much from listening to you all today. And I want to say a special thanks to each of our panelists. We are so proud at United Way and grateful for our ongoing partnership with each of you. And I agree and have no doubt that together we really can make North Texas a great place for everyone. And as each of the panelists said today, the time to accelerate that change is now. We got several comments in the chat box about how can I help? What can we do? And I'm going to share an idea with you in just a minute. But first, I want to say a special thanks to Texas Instruments and Terry West, because in line with Terry's guidance on keeping our minds, hearts, and pocketbooks open, I have the great honor and privilege of announcing a $5 million gift from the Texas Instruments Foundation to United Way of Metropolitan Dallas for immediate and long-term needs in education, income, and health, advancing those outcomes in North Texas. These funds will be used either directly or indirectly to support our COVID-19 relief, recovery, and rebuilding efforts. And as we said today, I mean, this is months and years in the rebuilding efforts to come. This gift is significant and will help us drive impact. And it also brings the total amount of resources raised over the last 7 weeks to more than $11.6 million. Also significant and an abundance of good. United Way has been a part of the DNA of Texas Instruments since the company was founded in 1951. J. Eric Johnson was one of the first chairs of what was then known as the Community Chest, now United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. And we have been inextricably linked to TI around community impact ever since. So thank you, thank you, thank you to the Texas Instruments Foundation and to Terry West for this gift. We will put it to good use and to work in our community. So I'll close by saying, referring back to the op-ed that was in the Dallas Morning News today. You know, the COVID pandemic, as Terry said several times, is this once in 100 years, once in a generation crisis. But in its wake, I think we all agree today that it presents a once in a generation opportunity to fold solutions to health, to income, and to education issues that have been pervasive in our city for many, many years. Our city and community leaders, organizations, nonprofits, corporations have been very polite about these discussions, and progress has been made, but it's slow because this work is complex, it's heavy, and it's hard and sometimes painful. Our community has developed over the years many plans, many partnerships and projects to address these pressing issues. But as we all agreed today, the panelists, that now is the time really to stop examining the challenges and move to action. To start doing that, civic, philanthropic, education, nonprofit, and business leaders must all come together in, as Pastor Simmons said, collaboration, 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 and align on key long-term community goals, on progress indicators and metrics. And we have to commit to coordinating our investments to drive progress and outcomes against those goals. Then we need to agree on a common scorecard so that we can track annual progress as a guide for future funding and future action. And you may not be surprised to learn that United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, in partnership with the panelists on this call and with this community, are working to do just that as we develop our next iteration of 10-year goals in the areas of education, income, and health for 2030. If there's one thing this crisis has taught us, it's that we can do really hard things, and we can do them quickly. Charles gave great perspective on this and the work of the North Texas Cares Collaborative. We know that some of our citizens have further to go to move up, but North Texas is amazingly generous, and the epidemic has magnified that generosity, certainly in the amount of resources we've raised to put to use in this community. It's overwhelming. Corporations here invest where their employees live and work. And along with the city and our region, we can and we must seize this opportunity to transform North Texas. By recognizing where the need is greatest and applying our resources, we can identify and build the interventions that will give people opportunity for mobility, for education and healthcare that's excellent, regardless of zip code. This pandemic is a once-in-a-generation crisis, but it's also a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fold in solutions to problems that we've put off for far too long. We've laid a great foundation in these past 2 months, and now is the time for Dallas to prove that we are all in this together. It will take an all-hands-on-deck effort and a commitment to leave no one behind. So how can you help us? I invite you, Susan and I and our team, to live united and join a group, an army, a growing army of ambassadors who are passionate about our community and who are hand raisers and change seekers. If you go to our website today, unitedwaydallas.org, you'll have a chance to sign on to the pledge and to our accumulation of resources necessary to drive and advance outcomes in education, income, and health. We are in the middle stages of developing these long-term goals that we'll announce at the beginning of December, and we want everyone in North Texas to be a part of this effort. So please go to the website, give us your name, give us your email address, and accept the pledge. I promise you'll fit right in. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and as we said at the beginning, the first of many more. So I hope you'll continue to join us and live united in North Texas. Thank you.